dear friends and colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to invite you to the first webinar on artificial intelligence organized by the European Fertility Society. It is entitled, "Is AI only a buzzword, or is it already starting to shape the new IVF world?" AI applications, needless to say, surround us today and have become an integral part of our lives. The potential for AI to usher a new era of standardization, automation, precision in reproductive medicine has generated lots of enthusiasm. The future of IVF may soon depend on the integration of new generation technologies into novel computational analysis to generate more accurate prediction models. As more and more publications that include AI computations are emerging every day, we would soon stand overwhelmed by a rapidly evolving technology that goes beyond our knowledge comfort zone. This webinar offers the opportunity to learn and interact with a panel of experts in the field of AI, scientists with different backgrounds, ranging from the academic all the way to the commercial. It sheds light on AI-based applications in the field of reproductive medicine and more specifically IVF. Please allow me to introduce our honorable faculty. And I start by Professor Assaf Ben Meir, Director of the Fertility and IVF Unit at Hadassah, Hebrew University Medical Center in Jerusalem, co-founder of and Chief Medical Officer at Fairtility. His interests consist of exploring the role of AI in IVF, in particular, the analysis of morphokinetics and morphology for embryo prediction. Dr. Dan Nayot, co-founder and Chief Medical Officer at FutureFertility, REI doctor and Medical Director of the Fertility Partners Network of IVF clinics in Canada. With FutureFertility, he brings his extensive knowledge in medicine and his strong background in mathematics together to solve the gaps he has experienced in over a decade of clinical practice. Dr. Michelle Perugini, a health tech entrepreneur with extensive experience in healthcare and advanced AI technologies, winner of the 2021 Women in AI Healthcare Award, a PhD in medicine. She has founded 2 global AI tech companies, co-founder and CEO of Presagenm, which first product was Life Whisperer, now used in IVF clinics globally for embryo selection. Dr. Piotr Wygocki, co-founder and co-chief executive officer at MIM Fertility, a Polish best-in-class deep tech company specializing in AI solutions at the University of Warsaw. Assistant professor at the University of Warsaw, winner of the Kaggle offline competition during Kaggle Days 2028. With his team of 50 AI and medical experts, he's committed to breaking new ground in the fertility world. Dear participants, kindly note the panel discussion is planned for about 45 minutes, and the last 15 will be dedicated to answer your questions and queries. So feel free to post your questions on the chat box. Now, without further delay, I move to the first question to our dear panelists. Question number 1, are AI applications in healthcare better than conventional manual methods? Piotr,
okay, so maybe I could start. So I think I would pose it in slightly different wording. So I would say that AI together with human is much better than human. So this is the state that we are in right now. So AI provides great values like standardization of the process, increase efficiency. It's never tired, always gives the same answers. And it's, of course, automatized processes. So these are like very strong values. However, we still need human in the loop for most of the cases. So this is a tool for human. So this would be my answer to this question.
Thank you, Piotr. Dr. Michelle?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think when we're trying to demonstrate that the AI is working effectively, we need something to compare it to. So often when we publish papers, we're doing a head-to-head or a direct comparison between the AI and the manual method or the human method. And I think that's an effective way of showing that the AI works, that it's providing additional value to what we can currently do. But in clinical practice, it's really a partnership between the AI and the human. And I think it's really important that these tools are clinical decision support, that they're used collectively. There's a whole range of different tools that we use to make decisions for our patients. And this is just one additional tool that can help us to be better at serving our patients and achieving better outcomes. So I think that AI and the human can actually work better together. But one other point that I want to make is that AI actually can see things often that humans cannot see. So it's not the same as automating the human. It's actually providing additional information that we can't do as humans. And so collectively, they are beneficial together.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead. That's fine?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so totally agree. I mean, embryologists and REIs are experts in their field. We know that we are skilled to analyze the embryo development, but first of all, we are all human, and we are also overburdened. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of workload on each one of us. And in this point, we should take the advantage of AI. And what are the advantages of AI? So first of all, objectivity and standardization. We all know that any manual annotation that we will ask the human to do, there will be a difference between human, and even in the same person, we'll find different answer in different times. So the advantage of AI is that the objectivity, you will get the same answer each time. Of course, it's time saving. I mean, when we start to do annotation to the embryos, most of the clinics did not use that because it takes a lot of time for the embryologist to do the annotation. And nowadays, of course, with the AI, we can get this information in seconds. It's very, very efficient. We can save time, and as Michelle mentioned, AI can also integrate a lot of data and a lot of parameters, things that human cannot do, and then to get a better conclusion or better result than what we can do. Of course, we will always need to use it as an assistant, to look on the result, to make sure that it's reasonable, and then probably we'll be more, we will want to use it as an assistant and additional tool for us to make a better decisions.
Thank you, Assaf. Dan, what's your take?
Yeah, so the question are AI applications better than conventional methods? And I think it really depends on the specific task we're asking the AI to do. For example, what at FutureFertility, we're focusing on the eggs. If we're talking about the task as, is this egg a mature egg or not? I mean, that's something that, it's probably near 100% accuracy already. So there's very little that an AI may, get advancements on that. I mean, it could speed it up. It could be a safety check. It doesn't get tired. But, so it depends on the situation. For example, again, the egg, because there's no egg scoring system, and we know that humans have limitations and they can't predict what will happen to the eggs. So that's a natural where we use AI to outperform something a human can do. So I think that is an example. But of course, as AI evolves, we've all been in this industry for a while, it's going to get better as the data gets better. But I agree with what all the panelists have said, that it's about synergy. I think when AI in healthcare first came out, it sort of attacked radiology first, which makes sense. And everybody was so worried that if we can pick up pneumonia on an X-ray, there's not going to be any need for radiologists. But that's, those are maybe, they probably don't know what a radiologist does, because a radiologist does a lot more than look at an X-ray. They listen to the clinical history, they communicate back to the physician, they're involved with technology. So I agree that it's going to be a support tool. It's not going to replace, it's just going to make us better and faster and so on.
Thank you, Dan. Question 2 is, how repeatable and robust are AI solutions in healthcare, and more specifically for IVF? Piotr, would you like to start?
Sure. Sure, we can stick with this order. Actually, I believe this is one of the major challenges that we have. This is somehow distinguish these solutions which are mature on the market with this and these solutions which are just starting. So this ability to translate this knowledge that yes, our solution was trained on 10 clinics, and will it work on this 11th one? So this is pretty serious. And actually, so we were developing our project for 3 years right now, and I think we spent like half of the time working specifically on that. So I think it's a major change. However, I could responsibly say that it's done. It provides the value. It is repeatable when done correctly.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, I think this is an age-old problem with artificial intelligence, right? There's a long history of AI having issues with repeatability and robustness. And I think actually it's a pretty serious issue because it adds to mistrust in terms of the technology. And I think they're real issues. There's a lot of issues with repeatability and robustness in terms of bias. How are the AI products being built? Have they been built on sufficiently diverse data sets that represent different patient demographics, different clinical environments? That's what adds to the robustness of these technologies. But in healthcare, it's actually pretty difficult to do that. It's difficult to access very large, diverse data sets. Because there's data privacy laws, data sovereignty, the data resides in different clinical environments all around the world. And so what ends up happening sometimes is that AI solutions are built on a single large data set that's not diverse, that's not robust. And when it gets applied to different clinical environments, it just doesn't work because it's not been trained on the right data. So it is a big problem. The way that we've kind of looked at that as a company, we've spent about 5-6 years now looking at this exact problem. And we think it's important both to have the ability to collaborate across global clinic networks to be able to access those diverse data sets. And so we have global clinic collaboratives with over 200 clinics now that contribute data to the development of our specific AI products. That's kind of a big research and development undertaking, but what it means is that we get the really rich, diverse data sets. And then, of course, it's about testing those AI really effectively on different clinical environments where the AI has not been trained, and making sure that it does actually work effectively, making sure that the clinical validation is robust. And that's the way that you kind of ensure that the AI is repeatable and robust and fit for purpose for the clinical environment.
Thank you. Assaf?
So I always mention to my students that AI is all about data. What you get in is what you'll get out. So, and data, I mean how big it is, how diverse it is, and how representative it is for the task that you are asking for. This is what Michelle just mentioned right now. But we always have to remember that in most of the cases, the data is retrospective data. We train the AI on data that we know what is the outcome. We train positive and negative results, and we want the computer to let us know what will happen in the next case, right? But there's the main issue and the main problem with the retrospective data. It's first of all is the biases that we have to find out if there is any bias, because if there is some kind of a bias that we did not get into, the data might be diverse, it might be not representative, and then in real world we will get wrong answers. So first of all, we have to find out that the retrospective data is non-biased data. And second of all, as Michelle mentioned, it should be representative. We should get the data from different countries, from different clinics, on different people, on several age groups, because if you see a study that the data included just a few hundreds of patients and young patient, this is not representative. You will not be able to use it later in a large population with the all at all ages. So this is something that when we read a study or we look on some kind of an AI tool, we need to see how the data looks like, how diverse it is, where they get it from. Did they look on all the biases that we are thinking of? And when we do this and we get large enough data, then your AI tool should be repeatable and robust.
Assaf, I have a question for you. Now, you mentioned about the quality of the data, and I totally agree. Can you comment on the design of the data set in terms of balanced versus unbalanced data? There's been some discussion there whether balanced is better than unbalanced. Can you comment on that for the participants to understand really what's going on?
Okay. So again, if in your data some of the group of some of the outcomes is very, very rare and the data is unbalanced, so let's say you have positive result just in 2% of your data and negative result in the rest of the data, of course the computer will learn eventually that if you will pick the negative result, in most of the time it will be correct. And this is the version that can happen when your data is unbalanced. So in that's why the data should be balanced. So then it's not something that the computer learn from the data, learn that if you will pick the negative result, you will get better result. If your data is balanced and your result should be more accurate, because if it's a random decision, you get 50% accuracy, right? So this is the main reason why the data should be balanced, and again it should be representative of all the cases that you have.
Right. Thank you, Assaf. Dan?
Yeah, we were joking before this that you don't want to go last in these sessions because you've got 3 brilliant people saying all the right things already, but which is why Johnny put me last on purpose. But I think what we're all saying the same thing. Generalizability is the key part. But we do this anyways before AI came along. You read a paper and it tells you the euploid rate is success rate is 60%, but at your clinic it's 40%. It is not fair for you to quote the 60% paper because there's variables that you don't have. This generalizability is always going to be part of medicine. And what all four of us have been doing over the last few years is focusing on not just getting as much data, but diverse, different countries, cleaning it up, annotating, but even the lab equipment. So, we can all talk about our own versions, but for the audience member, whatever you're looking at as an AI solution, just understand what's the problem they're trying to solve, how did they attack the problem, and is it relevant to what? For example, when we're doing eggs and we're using light microscope, we've spent a long time trying to use different cameras to validate the same outcome, because not every clinic is going to have the same camera and have an impact. So that part is key. I think just examples for the audience, like, so there's images and then there's clinical data. But if you were to, let's say, get data about estrogen levels and IVF outcomes, you could put it all together. But if one clinic uses letrozole during their treatment cycle and their estrogen levels are half as much, that doesn't mean their outcomes are worse, but that's going to change the whole thing. So you've got to really understand where the data is coming from and why. So that's the hardest part of what we all do.
Yeah, and then we hear a lot about model forgetting. Is this does it happen really that some models who learn on the go, right, especially machine learning, they tend to forget some of the initial features you teach them in the data set? Does it make sense? Does it happen really? And if it does, how can you in a clinic as a end user detect that?
So I'm not sure that it would forget the original features, but it might update. The more you can feed it, the more closed loop you have, whatever your system is. They might update which features are less interesting and which are more interesting. So it might look like it forgot the original, but it's because the updated version that's not too much value. But yeah, I mean, the beauty of this is we all believe that in the future it's going to get better and better. I mean, I think all of us believe there's going to be a limit, but that's the exciting part, is the feedback loop.
Can I add a comment there, Johnny? I think what you're referring to is model drift. This can actually happen if the data set that you continue to train on, or the data that the AI system is being used in practice, is significantly different to what it was originally trained on. But what's really important is all of these models that we're talking about here are locked algorithms. They're not algorithms that continuously learn. That's quite dangerous in healthcare, because you need to make sure you can have continuously learning algorithms, but you need to make sure that they're not drifting away from the original intent, and that they're still validating and working as they are intended to work on the data sets. So in the case of what we do for embryo quality assessment, for example, or what Dan does for oocyte assessment, they're locked algorithms. They're not continuously learning all the time, but we do periodically update them. And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that to be the case. So most of these algorithms are locked in a point in time.
Right, thank you.
And I think, of course, the question that you asked, of course, there are examples from previous studies, and we know that in some of the cases, the computer can learn something that is out of what we ask for. It happened in X-rays, that the computer learned that if there is an arrow in one direction or the other direction, it can give him the answer if it's a positive or negative result, and it was nothing to do with the X-ray itself. So, and that's why we need to put into the AI tool also transparency and explainability. I mean, if we want to understand why the computer decided on in one reason or the other, it will be better that it will be also transparent. So the computer should explain what in the embryo or in the eggs he picked, and decided by that this is a good or a bad embryo or eggs. This transparency is very important. First of all, it's important for us to understand that what was the reason. In some of the cases, the reason that the computer mentioned, it's something that we can learn about. Maybe it's something in new biology that we didn't think about it, and the computer thought about it, or the computer picked it from the embryo or the eggs. The second thing, when we will see the reason why the computer decided this is a good embryo or bad embryo, this will, first of all, we see that it's not garbage. it's reasonable why he picked this embryo. And second of all, it's all about also about trust, because we mentioned before that all of us are afraid from, or at the beginning we were afraid of AI and this black box that we get the data in and we get an answer and we don't really understand what's going on in between. So if we'll get explain why the computer picked one or the other, this will increase the trust, and then we as a scientific community will be able to use those AI tools.
I want to add a comment to what Assaf said because it's important. So we talk about the black box that we're trying to turn into a glass box, but what Assaf was pointing out time, you got to make sure at least in the black box, because sometimes it's stuff outside the box. So, the arrows up or down, or there's a famous example of labs that hold the pipelle for the embryo versus labs that don't hold the pipelle. It was just better labs with better outcomes versus so that to us in the industry, that's the bare minimum. You need to make sure the region of importance is being analyzed. But then there's the second level, like what is it? Because first of all, it makes us feel better that maybe we can understand it. Is it time from 2-cell to 3-cell to 4-cell? Is it the cytoplasm granularity? But also it might give us some insights that, from there we start working on what can improve cell division and stuff like that.
Dan, speaking of the black box, I've read a while ago that there's a new technology now to break into the black box. Is this now something that is, at hand, or is this something for the future?
Well, I think that's what we're to do. But when you say breaking into black box, I think that's sort of the buzzwords we keep hearing about, like explainable AI, interpretable AI, which is important. So in the very least, you got to make sure it's the box that we're talking about, not outside the box. And then you want to try to highlight what it is. But, whether it's a heat map or annotating a certain dysmorphism, like we don't know specifically that there's not always a biological correlation to what the computer is picking up yet.
Can I make one additional comment? This is a really important topic. I think I completely agree with both Dan and Assaf that, transparency is important and explainability is important, but I also have a little bit of a counter view on this, because the whole benefit of the AI is that it's looking at really complex patterns of thousands of features that we can't see with the human eye. That's why it's so effective, right? That's why it's providing new information to us that we don't necessarily have access to visually. So if it was able to kind of boil a decision down to 5 individual parameters, we could probably do that as humans. But the whole benefit of the AI is that it's looking at the complexities within those images that we just can't compute as humans. So I think it is important, and we do a lot as a company in terms of, as Dan mentioned, kind of heat maps and honing in on different parts of, for the embryo, for example, looking at the zona pellucida versus the inner cell mass, looking at where the AI is focusing more heavily. And that gives us insights into the biology. But to the extent that you're ever going to know exactly what's contributing to that score, I don't think that's realistic. And I think actually that's going to minimize the value of the AI. So it's about developing enough trust, but not boiling it down to the most simplest components that it's no longer helpful.
Thank you, Michelle. The third question is about AI applications. What kind of applications can improve IVF outcomes in your mind?
Okay, so I'll traditionally start. So what I believe is that the IVF world is a pretty perfect place for AI and statistics in general. And the main reason behind that is that it's really tough. It's very random process that you very often have 2 very similar patients, 2 very similar embryos, and one of them will happily become a mother, and the second one will not. And I mean, so this is a perfect place to be, and there's so many decisions to be made about, I don't know, vitrification, stimulation, when to finish the stimulation, and so many processes to automatize. So what is the low-hanging fruit? What we are focusing on are the imaging examinations. So anything connected to ultrasound. So we specialize in counting follicles. However, there are so many different things to tackle during the stimulation. So I think this would be these are the low hanging fruits, and this in my opinion would be the focus. This everything connected to image processing. This is the strongest, probably the strongest power of AI right now. And like next topic would be anything connected to this like hard decision making, like for example concerning stimulation. This is my my opinion on that.
Thank you, Piotr. Michelle?
I think Dan and Assaf should go next. I'll go last on this one. We'll switch it up.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. Go ahead, Assaf.
So actually, I think AI can get into IVF in each point of the journey that the couples get through. I mean, for the beginning, the diagnosis, through to decide or to help us with what kind of protocol we should use, through monitoring during the IVF treatment, and of course, as most of us started to do, to evaluate the sperm, the eggs, the embryos, the endometrium, the follicles, etc., etc. Of course, AI application can also help us in prediction models like pregnancy rate and what is the chance of those couples that's sitting next to us or in front of us, what the chance to have a baby in the next cycle. We need to remember that the more data that we will have, the more the AI can help us. In fertility, we use the time-lapse incubator for the embryo development and the embryo quality. And the advantage is that you get much more data on the embryo and on the embryo development, but also on the embryo quality, because it's not just a snapshot of how the embryo looks on day 3 or how the embryo looks on day 5, but you see the whole journey of the embryo. And in some of the cases, this can explain you why 2 embryos that look the same at day 3 or day 5, the chance to have implantation is totally different because the development was different. Because just when we started to look on all this time-lapse incubator, we were more familiar with, let's say, ducts with direct uneven cleavage. This is something that we will not be able to know about the embryo if we look on the embryo just on day 3 or day 5. And the advantage of this, of the TLI, the time-lapse incubators, that you can see the whole journey. You will get much more data on this embryo, and this will improve your prediction tool on embryo quality.
Assaf, I have a quick question from someone who's not into the field, but it is my impression that you can find more specific features that will tell you this is a bad embryo or a low viability embryo than features that will tell you this is a potentially viable embryo, right? So you, I would say you have too many features associated with a potentially viable embryo, but too little and more specific for non-viability. So do you think the strength of these prediction models are more to select out the embryo of the lowest potential or to select in the one of the highest potential?
So again, I think when we'll get more and more data, we will be better in prediction the best embryo. Because this is the question. The question is, we want to know which is the best embryo to transfer, to do the first transfer, because then, first of all, we can do elective single embryo transfer. And second of all, we will decrease the what we call time to pregnancy. Okay, the woman will be pregnant in the first cycle or the second cycle because you pick the right embryo. And it is true that at the beginning, most of the AI tools were much better in getting or to pick or to tell you, to let you know which embryo not to transfer. But between all the embryos that they think that are good quality, the grading or to let you know which one should be the first, it was it was not that good. But today, when we have much more data, and we not just again from the time-lapse incubator, but not just from the time-lapse incubator, when you increase the number of embryos that you have, the computer can get more and more efficient in picking the right embryo and to let you know which embryo you should transfer first. And by that, you will be able to get time to pregnancy, to decrease the time to pregnancy, because you pick the perfect embryo at the first chance.
Thank you, Assaf. Dan?
So I love this question because it's simple, but it's the whole field in one. So like, which AI application can improve IVF outcome? So, as I've seen the evolution of AI in our field, you can see the first use cases are the logical cases trying to improve outcome. Embryo selection is a good one because the concept, like Assaf said, if you can select better than the standard of care, maybe you get them pregnant faster, maybe you're even decreasing the miscarriage potential. So, another case use that's becoming more popular is either when to trigger, because that will affect outcome, or person the dose. So these are all AI attempts to increase outcome. But I think there's different ways to define the outcome. Like, for example, access to care is a key one. If you can make IVF much more accessible, affordable, that's great. If you can automate the follicle counting so your sonographer can do 50 patients instead of 10 patients, that's great. Counseling is another one. There was a paper that just came out, which was pretty interesting, that showed if you do an IVF cycle and you get no blasts, your success rate in the second IVF cycle is as high as 30%. Like, to us, that's logical as clinicians because we know there's biological variability. But to the patient sitting in front of you who got zero blast and asking them to pay, depending where you live, $5, $10, $20, $30,000 to try again, that's not going to happen. And you not counseling them and not letting them try again decreases their cumulative success rate. So I think counseling is another key one. So that, for example, we're doing eggs, we're doing egg freezing, and a lot of people who freeze their eggs, they one cycle, and most people don't even come back or don't even know their chances of success. Right. And ultimately, most of them have not enough eggs to have a high enough cumulative success rate. So just a counseling tool to promote their statistical chances is a good way to improve the cumulative outcomes.
Yeah. Now, Dan, considering that euploidy status, right, accounts for 65% of the viability of an embryo. Now, do you foresee that component will be an important part of any prediction modeling in the future? Would you incorporate that information in the future to make your model even more powerful?
I think that's its own lecture. I think we could do a whole session on PGTA or not PGTA. But, if you're going to do PGTA, then, I usually tell patients, if you're going to do the test, you can't ignore the results. Otherwise, what was the point of the test? So if you're doing PGTA, then we're talking about embryo selection among the transferable embryos, whether that's only euploids or low level or no result, right? And then the question is, how many times do we have so many options that we need embryo selections? Like, do we have an average of 4 euploids? Okay, well, then we still need embryo selection or not. I think most of us believe euploid is a necessary prerequisite, but it's not the only thing that we need. Assaf said there's other developmental part, rating and day of development and things like that.
Right.
I'm not really sure your question. Your question was, would I incorporate ploid into embryo selection? I would say if I had the data then I'd certainly have a model that would incorporate that to see if it works. But then you have to obviously personalize it to where you're going to use this data.
Right. Yeah.
So
Michelle,
maybe I can
You
talk
can
a little
always.
bit.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Assaf, you go.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on that because Life Whisperer, we have a non-invasive embryo viability assessment, which is a static endpoint analysis of day 5 embryos where we predict pregnancy outcomes and help with embryo selection. But then we also have a non-invasive genetics algorithm that predicts ploidy status of the embryos from the images, from those same images in about 10 seconds without a biopsy. Now, that might seem crazy that you can do that from an embryo image, but when you have a large data bank of tens of thousands of embryos where you know whether the PGT-A outcomes were aneuploid or euploid or mosaic or anything in between, the AI is similarly able to pick up features of those embryos that relate to the genetic integrity of the embryos as a physical functional output. Now, the important thing is embryo quality is a function of both genetics and viability. So we know that euploid embryos can transfer, but sometimes they don't implant, right? We know that aneuploid embryos can implant, but they won't give rise to a healthy baby, or they'll lead to a miscarriage. So they're both important. They're both synergistic. We found that using both of those AI together actually doubles the reduction in time to pregnancy that you can achieve. So they're both really important predictors of outcomes. So this is kind of on this discussion of, how can these AI applications be used in the lab? I think what we're going to start seeing is synergies between these different applications of AI, and we're going to start seeing bigger step changes in outcomes. And the last point that I wanted to make is I think it's great having different models for different types of applications in the IVF lab, but I completely agree with Dan. It comes down to the need of the patient, and it comes down to the cost of the solution, because if we're already, IVF is already for a privileged few. I don't like that ethos. I like the ethos that we can use technology to make this process more effective for patients, more efficient for the clinics, and at a low cost. And that's been our ethos as a company. And when we start looking at kind of layering on, sometimes, we can do really well with some of these approaches. In fact, we've shown that using static endpoint analysis, you can actually get the same accuracy as using time-lapse imaging. Now, that's not to say that time-lapse imaging doesn't have other functions, because of course it does, but it comes at a cost, right? It comes at a cost to the patient, to the clinic. So it's just a function of what patients are willing to pay for, what the clinics have at their disposal. And I think when you're a clinic looking to integrate AI, you need to consider, what is it that you already have? How can you engage at the lowest possible cost to create the highest efficiency and not add a massive cost burden to patients? And I think that's where the integration piece is really important.
Right. That's very important. Thank you, Michelle. We move to the 4th question. From a proof of concept to patients, what are the challenges in integrating AI solutions in the IVF laboratory? Piotr, would you like to start?
Yes, I'd be happy to start. So, what are the main challenges? I think it's still somehow cultural, that this is something new and this is a tool which has great value. However, it has some limitations, and we need to really understand how to use it. So yes, like we are using MRI or other imaging, and we just understand that, okay, it's very helpful. However, it doesn't show everything. It has, you still need to incorporate many other data points and to understand fully the picture of the patient and the units. So we need to build the trust to learn how to use it efficiently. So this is the main issue, in my opinion. And there are so many others. I think it's just generally, like, for example, like small normal things like clinics that do not have like EMR, proper EMR, and still, you know, writing things on paper. And it's hard to incorporate, you know, like these techniques when you, for example, you cannot, you know, connect your ultrasound, um, or for example, you do not have, you know, on your microscopy systems, you do not have these cameras. I mean, it's tough. So you need to first do this first step to stabilize this your whole environment, and then you can proceed with AI solutions. So this is very often like this easy obstacle, and I mean, but also it, you know, I believe what is one of the greatest value of AI is the standardization of the whole process. And so you've got all of this, you know, data collected in systemized way, and then you could build on that, and you can make your decisions based on the standardized data, and this is what is, I mean, this, like, even using EMR, this actually brings very similar value, and yes, so this is in my opinion these are the largest obstacles. But I think the largest one is actually the culture of somehow.
Thank you. Michelle, would you like to be next?
Sure. I think, you know, trust is still an issue with integration for sure. And I think what we need to do is give clinics the opportunity to try the solutions, right? Anytime that anyone is skeptical of whether something works or not, the best way to see whether it works is to try it. And we need to help them to be able to do that validation themselves, to be able to test it and make sure that it works, make sure that they're comfortable with how it works, make sure that it fits within their workflow, and work with them to understand, is there any improvements that can be made? Does it need to be integrated? Can it sit outside of the current process? How do you, you know, the other really important consideration is how do you build this type of solution into the cost model, right? So no one thinks about the cost of these solutions. Who's going to pay for it? And one of the problems that we see is, you know, we've talked a lot today about standardization of processes and objectivity. If you're only offering these solutions as an add-on service to a very few patients, you're not going to see the efficiency gains in your clinic. You are not going to see the improved outcomes of your patient population, and you're not going to get the standardization benefits. So from my perspective, that's not the right use of AI. If you're going to engage with this type of technology, it needs to be used across all patients. You need to have it as an integrated solution, and it should be low cost enough that you can embed it in the total cost of the IVF treatment cycle. And then the advantage for patients should be delivered as, you know, improved success rates, the ability to standardize and optimize across all patients. I think that's where the real benefits are to be had. But again, we need to overcome those trust barriers. The clinics need the opportunity to be able to try it. The way that we do that as a company is we provide a really extensive validation protocol that they can go through with retrospective or prospectively collected data that steps really simply through how they do the analysis themselves on their own data. And every time they do that, it gives them confidence. Okay, this is actually working in my hands, in my clinic, for my patients. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. Cost is a very important thing, and especially with what's going on today in the world economy. I mean, that's very, very, very important. Thank you. Assaf, would you like to read?
Yes, Peter, I think you call it culture. The bottom line, we, all of us as a scientific community, we are very, very conservative. And the way to penetrate to the clinics or the labs is to, I think, it's to explore and explain the black box. And that's why I think, again, the transparency and explainability is one of our ways to get the trust of this community. Recently, it was published that there's more than 200 AI tools for Röntgen, for X-rays. but just 2% of it is used by the radiologist. And probably one of the reasons, maybe some of the reason are the cost or et cetera, but probably some of the reason is the trust. And this is the reason why we put the transparency and explainability in our tool, because when the embryologist see what marks the computer can give him during the analysis of the embryo, and the computer and the AI, our AI tool can show you that there is high fragmentation, there is the annotation is incorrect, the time from T3 to from T2 from T to T3 is longer than the usual, etc., etc. The embryologist can understand what was the reason to give the grade for the embryo, and in this way he will trust the AI and can get it into the daily work at the lab. So I think if we want to introduce those tools into our conservative society, we must show the society what this black box thinking, how we get the results, and then afterwards they will be more convinced and will be more convenient to use it. And I think this is what we should pay attention in the next few years.
Thank you, Assaf. Dan, you're next.
I'll touch on similar points. I think the first one is like general adaptability of AI. You know, ChatGPT came along a few months ago, and it really raised the AI world. You know, all day long I think about how else can I use it. I read my kids' bedtime stories by their prompts. I just found out there are real careers called prompt engineers. It's not about the AI. It's how creative is your question. How do you phrase it? And that's really shown us that like the tide is rising, but still there's this fear. There's a fear that an embryologist thinks their job is going to be taken away, or they won't be seen as necessary, or the doctor is going to make the wrong mistake because they relied on the AI. So there's generally this concern. Although, you know, like Peter said, like it's like EMR. It took many years. EMR made a lot of logical sense. But the integration and changing the flow is if anyone's ever done it, it takes a long time. And the champion at the top of the clinic has to sort of say, we're going to get through this tough time and this learning, and then it's going to be extremely useful for us later. Yeah. I think the other key thing is like, whenever you come up with a solution, you need to spend not just hours on getting a cleaning data and making your best solution, but you've got to spend hours in the lab with the patients, with the clinician. You've got to understand. You might solution, but it now takes the lab 17 extra minutes to do it and $125 worth of culture media to do it. And nobody cares about your solution because actually, so if you don't understand the workflow and the details, if you don't understand how the doc talks to the patient after each scenario, then you've caused them a problem, right? If your AI says select embryo 4, but I selected embryo 3 and I was right, I'm a genius. But if I was wrong, the patient says, why didn't you go with the AI? And I'd like a second opinion. So, you know, there's this fear that if I don't use it, but it's a tool like everything else.
Yeah. And Dan, speaking of ChatGPT, there was an article in May, this month, actually, 23, in the American Journal of Gastroenterology, showing that it failed the board exam for gastroenterology. Right, it scored 63%, whereas people who usually pass it score anywhere between 95 and 99. Right, and that's again comes into play. Right, it's the lack of understanding that always requires it to be complementary, probably to humans, rather than replacing humans. Right, so it's a complementary tool. But
I was going to say this is why me and Assaf are not GI doctors, because it's a much harder exam.
We move to the last question. Plateau or golden age? What changed in the last 5 years? I believe we might have a minute to just catch up with a few questions. Thank you. Piotr, your turn.
Yes. So I, I will go back actually to the one of the first questions about repeatability, and I love this comment of Dan is like saying that okay, what is actually robustness of our standard decision making without AI? So we are basing our decision on papers which were done on very specific population for 60 patients. We like check that something works or something doesn't work, and then we try to generalize this decision over the whole population very often. And this is a problem, and this is why many medical papers are actually not very hard to reproduce. This is well known. This is tough. And so going back to the main question, so what is my opinion is that we had so many different products which actually didn't work, which really make it what that somehow make it really hard, makes it really hard for us to introduce something new. And many people opinion of many people is that actually for this 25 years, so we invented ICSI, maybe PGTA, and actually we just what else really happened? I mean, so I talked with all of these doctors. So as you probably would guess, so I believe that this great chance for us is AI with all the values it brings.
Great.
So yes, this would be my opinion.
Thank you. Michelle, you next?
Maybe I'll go next to mix it up a bit.
Yeah, go for
Great.
it, Dan.
Okay. So I still think we're in the golden age, although it's moving forward very fast. So a few years ago, there would be one or two abstracts, and it was, oh my God, I come to this room and listen to this abstract in AI. And then there would be like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And let's apply AI to this scenario. Let's apply AI to this scenario. And then there was like, how accurate did you get? Oh, and they got this. And then it was, oh, here's a perspective. So it was evolution very fast. And now you didn't hear any of that here today. Now you're hearing more of like, how can you integrate it to the lab? What's the user experience? What's the cost effectiveness? What's the patient experience and stuff like that? But it's certainly still the golden age. I mean, I'll steal this. Nikita's in the audience, and he always says this. We're all, as an industry, when I say industry, the AI fertility industry, we only get one chance to make a first impression. And this is the stage that we're at. We're rolling it out into clinical use, and we're trying to do it intelligently and to show the evidence. And as long as there's some evidence in different ways to measure it, then I think it will continue to evolve. And then in 5 years, when we do another session, we'll be thinking about something else.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dan. I think, I remember when Dan and I were having conversations when we both first started in this industry, in the AI part of this industry in early 2017. This is not something that's come up in the last couple of years. I think it's become a lot more, there's a lot more players building solutions, which is great because what it does is it elevates the breadth of utility of AI across the whole IVF lab. So I think it's a really exciting time. I think it's the implementation phase. I think there's been a scientific phase which will continue forever, as it should. But I think we are now getting to the point. I mean, we've got, our Life Whisperer products are approved in 48 countries. We've got clinics all around the world, everywhere from India to Europe to Canada and US using the solutions, and it's really the time now, I think, that clinics are ready to start implementing and start seeing the benefits of these within clinical or laboratory practice. So I think it's a very exciting phase. I think we have to be very careful. I think we have to be very considerate around how we implement and how we test these products. But I do think it's kind of the general consensus is this is here to stay and it's going to help me.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Assaf?
If we are talking about getting AI tools into IVF, I think we are still introducing this tool into IVF. I mean, we are just at the beginning of understanding what we can do with AI in IVF. Most of us use AI to predict eggs and embryos. But as we mentioned before, AI can help us, assist us in any time point of the journey of that the couples do. And that's why I think that we are just at the beginning of introducing AI into the field. I think if we want really to integrate or get it into the routine workflow, we need two things from the industry. The companies should get the trust, and we will get the trust as long as, first of all, the labs will get the results. We also have several labs that started to use our fertility Chloe machine learning tool, and as long as they will use it and see the advantages that they get from the tool, first of all, they will be more prone to use AI tools that we started to develop, and second of all, more and more labs will use it. The second thing is we as a conservative community, we will have to try to use new technologies. And we I'm speaking as a physician or embryologist and not as part of a company. We need to be more prone to use new technologies, because otherwise we will be left behind. So this is the other side of how to introduce those tools into the industry, into the IVF lab. So no, we are not in the golden age. I think we'll get there in the next few years.
Yeah. Assaf, Dan, Michelle, Piotr, thank you for this fascinating and very engaging session. I think we've got time for a couple of questions, because most of the questions, as I can see here, have been answered actually by the discussion. I start with the first one. It is a classical. Are RCTs required to validate essentially your models, or it goes beyond an RCT, right? So, Michelle, you'd like to go first, or up to?
Yeah, I can step in here. I think, just as new technology kind of arises, we need to think of the most appropriate ways to test that new technology. The challenge with AI is that often it's clinical decision support, and it's designed to be used in conjunction with a whole range of other methods. Now, the RCT trial design doesn't allow for that. I'm not completely against RCT as a trial design, but I think there's more effective ways of testing these types of technologies that actually play to how they're meant to be utilized within the clinical environment. So I think, it's kind of a function of the history of conservatism. We always think, this is the gold standard of testing, but we need to start reimagining how are these tools most appropriately tested for their function. And if you look in radiology and other areas where AI has been implemented, it's not RCTs. So I don't think that is the right testing method.
Yeah, I'd like to hear the opinion of Assaf, coming from a strong academic background. Too.
I think it's in the last few years, more and more people talked about what are the disadvantages of RCTs. And it's not all about RCTs. We know that RCT, first of all, it's very, very, very expensive if you want to do it. You will not be able to do it on thousands of people. You will not finish the study in 10 or 15 years if you want such a huge amount of participants. And the second thing, usually when you do RCTs, and I did RCTs in the past, there's always you always pick what kind of population you want to get into the RCTs. And this is another problem, because if you get into the RCTs just young patient, or just good prognosis patient, or just people without male factor, and then the result cannot be generalized for the whole population. And that's why in the last years, we still think that RCTs are good, but also what is called real world studies, or real life studies are more and more common. And in this case, AI tools, we can show that AI tools are fine if we get huge data and test the AI on huge data. On retrospective data, it's still retrospective data, but it's huge data. And if you get good result and you show accuracy, I think this is good enough to let us know that this AI tool is fine. And I'm pretty sure, and I said it also in my company, I'm pretty sure we will not see any RCTs in this field in the next few years, because you will not be able to do RCTs on thousands of patients and to show the efficiency of improving IVF results, because it's undoable. Actually, it's undoable.
Yeah. So I agree, Assaf. I think by the time you complete your RCT, you have moved to the next level of technology, and then it keeps moving. Yeah. And I think we can
somehow, if I can just post slightly different statement, because it might be interesting. So I totally agree that these retrospective studies are very valuable, and the main, and the main point is that you could do the study on very large data set, which is very precious. However, when, like right now, we were testing our Foley scan, it's like crucial to like go with the same videos for ultrasound with standard way, and do exactly the same with Foley scan and see the difference. This is, in my opinion, the very important checkpoint on the list to have. I'm not saying that it's like the only proof that you need. Of course, all of these other things mentioned are extremely valuable, and maybe they are very important. However, I believe that constructing this this way of prospectively analyzing the results of your algorithm and comparing it with like the standard way, even to show like non-inferiority somehow. It's crucial to make solution which will give the value and part of being responsible, like in this field, to prove, like, provide the full validation of the algorithms. That's what I think.
Thank you, Dan. I think the last question is about open source initiatives in AI for IVF. Is it possible community-driven development of AI models, public data sets that could be used for benchmarks? Do you see this as a possible direction in the near future?
I can maybe jump in here. Yes, I do see it as possible, but in a restricted manner. So I think open source initiatives for AI are very difficult because of data ownership and kind of commercial interests of those developing solutions. I mean, you look at the companies that are playing in this space, and they have spent, 4, 5 years, 6 years kind of doing the hard yards to collect and clean and build these data sets. It's not reasonable to expect that they're just going to be open sourced. But I do think that we can, as a kind of society, have maybe a reference data set that different technologies can be tested against. And, maybe that's how we solve for that problem. In terms of community-driven development of AI, this is entirely our entire business model around global clinic collaboratives. I think it's incredibly important because not only does it give those clinics and clinicians the opportunity to be part of the development of these AI products, which helps build trust and understanding. It also helps drive richness in the models that you develop because they're the experts and you want that kind of global knowledge base to be inbuilt into the AI. So I think community-driven development's really important, and you need to think about the incentives that you give back to not only the clinics but the patients that are contributing data to those efforts, and that's a really important consideration. But yes, I do think both of those are possible and are already happening.
Great, thank you. Any other input on this question?
What I guess, elaborate on is, it's happening right now. It's not huge, but there are public data set with labels for both embryos, both ultrasounds. There are also open source algorithms available. So it's happening. I think it's just the matter of time. It's hard because of the regulation and GDPR and all of the other issues. But however, I think it will happen, and I personally see the great value in this.
Good. And I think with this question, we have to end our webinar. I personally have learned a lot. Thank you very much. And I certainly hope every one of our attendees did. I extend a warm word of gratitude to our highly valued panelists. Thank you. And to you all who joined us today. And we should not forget the European Fertility Society, who was very insightful in putting together this very timely webinar. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.